Welcome to this episode of Eureka, and we are meeting when the nation, not just this nation, but world over, we are facing this huge challenge posed by the infection caused by novel coronavirus. People all over the world are scared, are in panic mode. India today is under lockdown. People are looking for options. How do we face this challenge? How are we going to end this? Science is going to be a very important tool. Science and technology is going to be a major way by which we can face this challenge. And today's our guest is the director of a very important institute in India, an institute under CSIR, Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology, CCMB, Hyderabad. We are going to have this interview with the Dr. Rakesh Kumar Mishra, Director. Sir, thank you, sir, for being in the show. I mean, it's a very wonderful opportunity. Most of us are wanting to know what the Indian science is doing. I mean, for this major challenge, and particularly we'll start with your institute. One of the first thing that we came to know about your institute is that it was recognized as one of the center for testing. So many people have this question in their mind. After all, we go for blood test. We go to many hospitals for various tests. Why there is a restriction on who will be able to test this and who will not be able to test this? Why some center has to be, first of all, declared as a testing center? So if we start from that basic, many people, I think, would also understand how important this is.
The problem in testing with this virus is that you have to use little bit high-end technology. It is not established, it's a new disease. So first time we saw this virus just a couple of months back. So which means we don't have many tools, no antibodies, no established, recognized methods to detect it. So it's more like technology-driven testing at the moment, and it involves basically measuring the number of RNA particles, RNA molecules that are there in the sample that we collect from the patients. So it's a little bit technically challenging. So the institutes have several capacities. One is, first of all, the capacity to handle a live virus. This we know is so infectious, so the person has to be careful. So there are certain biosafety measures, they should be there in the place, and you need at least BSL-2, biosafety level 2 facility, if not biosafety level 3. And then you should know how to make RNA, how to handle RNA from a given sample, and then converting that RNA into DNA, we call it cDNA, and then amplify that DNA in a very special way, which is called real-time PCR. And then that quantity of the product that comes with all this long process is an indication where there is a infection or not. So there is not many labs, unfortunately, can do it. So that's why ICMR has been recognizing one after other, depending upon the availability of facilities, availability of equipments.
So you use the word called BSL-3, biosafety level 3. Yeah. So this biosafety level 3 lab, what will be its features? What will it entail?
So biosafety level 3, there are few features in this, that it should be under negative pressure so that nothing can come out from there, whatever is being handled. And it has certain restrictions. There are 2-3 doors in this. So you keep changing your shoes and wear gloves, and then wear all protective gears, what we call as PPE, then wear glasses, all those things, and then go into this room where you're always working with double gloves, N95 mask, and glass that covers it, and head covers everything. So the multi-level of protection, and the people cannot freely go. We don't allow telephone or watch or pen, anything, no mobile. So it's very, very restricted, because you are working with a live virus, which is very infectious. So CCMB has such a facility because we have infectious disease groups that are working in parasites, and we have virology group. So that is why we have these facilities. So it's easy for us to adopt for testing.
Okay. So this is not your usual work. I mean, like you don't usually do testing, but in this testing time for India, that your facility has risen up to the occasion, right?
Right. So we do research on the viruses. Here we are routinely doing testing and testing of samples. Hundreds of samples come every day. So in the lockdown, we have completely dedicated our facility for testing. In fact, we have expanded and facilitated thing in such a way that large number of samples can be tested. We have also made a provision that we train people because we have these facilities, so we can train hospital staff or even volunteers so that they are familiar with the biosafety practices and then the sophisticated molecular biology techniques that are required in this testing.
Yeah. So one is, as you are pointing out, the reverse transcription PCR test. So where you are actually testing the availability of virus in your nasal passage or in your throat. That's
Yeah.
what people do, right? I mean, like put a sample either through your nose or throat
Yeah.
usually. But
Yeah.
now we also have this so-called a rapid test, which actually takes out blood. So what is the difference between sample being collected from nose, something like a sputum, and this blood being drawn from your blood?
So, the sputum is directly you are asking whether the virus is present or not, because that's where the virus is in action and that is how it is spreading. So, where it grows in the epithelial layer of our respiratory system, and when we breathe or sneeze or cough, it comes out and goes to other person. That's how it spreads. So, when you take sputum or saliva or swab, this means you are looking for the virus in that fluid. When you're
Okay.
taking the blood, in the blood virus counts are very little. They will be there some, but most of time you are looking for either proteins of the virus or the antibody that has been triggered in the patient against that virus. So
Okay.
those tests are very rapid. You can do in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But there are a lot of issues with the antibody-based testing
Mhm.
because after the infection, it takes 7 to 10 days for immune system to trigger and give any visible antibody in the blood. So that
Mhm.
means very early infection will not be detected.
Mhm.
And so that means a negative test by this kind of rapid test doesn't mean the person doesn't have the virus. It is
Okay.
that person has not responded, its immune
Got it.
system has not responded, but person will be spreading for 10 days. So that is why this is not very good for containment or stopping the spread. But that
Uh,
is useful if antibody is there. That means person either has the virus or had earlier and is now hopefully immune. Although those needs to be established. But those are rapid tests, but they have limitations.
yeah. So your center is also now one of the center which has been recognized to validate the kits. I mean, so if different manufacturers come up with different ideas, your lab is also one of the labs now recognized because of want of time to validate this kind of kits, right? So what does this validation actually entail?
So, as you may have heard that one of the problem that all of us are facing is the shortage of kits or the reagents that are required for this testing. Not only the labs, but even the labs who are able to do testing, they short supply of reagents because whole world need the same thing, the kit against coronavirus, so they
Yeah.
can test. And unfortunately, most of these kits are imported. So then it becomes a limitation because if come European company or American company, they will supply to their countries first, and even their declare or undeclared restrictions they operate on this. So one of the ways is that, and at the same time, these kits are not rocket science. They can be actually made in a carefully trained people. They can do this thing, except one or two items that need to be imported in that case if the one is assembling the kit. So one of the ways to get rid of this shortage is that we test the indigenized kit. We are in fact validating even the external kits, imported ones, so that more and more options become available. So the both availability and the cost will come down. So that is one of the good thing that ICMR has done that enabled us so that we can now validate and unleash the local talent, local availability, entrepreneurs or startups who can come up with the alternative options, alternatives of testing.
We'll take a very short break. Keep watching Eureka. After this break, we'll continue with some of the very important activities that this institute is taking to ensure and provide support to the COVID war in India. Keep watching Eureka.
बुखार, थकान और सूखी खांसी कोविड-19 के सामान्य लक्षण हैं। इसके अलावा कुछ मरीजों को शरीर में दर्द, नाक बंद होना, नाक बहना, गले में खराश और डायरिया जैसे लक्षण भी देखने को मिले हैं। कोविड-19 से संक्रमित होने पर कुछ मरीजों को सांस लेने में तकलीफ जैसी शिकायत भी होती है। डॉक्टर्स दिल की बीमारी, शुगर और ब्लड प्रेशर के मरीजों को ज्यादा सावधानी बरतने के लिए कहते हैं।
Sir, we were discussing about how your institute was repurposed to provide a testing facility and also as a validation center because of this urgency that has come in. So another area that we are told that your institute is working is culturing this virus. So what is the catch in culturing virus? I mean, after all, any patient, you can take the virus and put it in petri dish, it should grow, right? So what are the challenges in culturing a virus?
Yeah. So what you said is actually exactly what is the culturing the virus. But as you know, any virus, not only this virus, they will not grow on their own. Outside any living system, they are like a dead particle. They need a cell in which they can grow. So there are certain challenges. First of all, you need a biosafety level 3 facility, fully functional, properly validated. Then only you can handle infectious agents like this, which spread very fast. One of the bad thing of this virus is that it's very efficient in spreading. It catches very quickly. So you need that facility. Given that you have the facility, now you have to find the correct cell in which it will enter. Like it's a human body also, if it is there in your hand, it will do nothing unless it reaches mouth cavity or nasal cavity. Only those cells have particular receptor which give us a ticket to go inside the cell. So now you have to find a cell which accept this virus, or the virus is able to enter into the cell. So that is the most critical part of...
So you mean to say that the virus can enter only certain types of cell? Correct. Only those types of cell have, let's say, for example, the door which the virus can open, right?
Yeah, exactly. Many other cells, you put the virus will not be able to enter the cell, and eventually it will die and cell will continue to grow. So the coronaviruses have been cultured in the labs, and this family, there are certain number of cell lines, and luckily we have that cell lines because we have virology group, and these cells are used for many other purposes. These are called Vero cells. This Vero cell is just the name of this thing. It's isolated from African green monkey kidney, and there it seems to work. So these cells we grow in large quantity, and what we are doing is when patient isolates come, we take this virus and put in the cells and wait for the virus to enter the cell, and then it will go and multiply in the cell, and then it will come out of the cell and cell will be killed. So then there are two parameters to measure. One is after 2-3 days cells will die, and then in the liquid in which cells is growing, there will be large amount of virus. So this is the process of culturing. And so each time now once cells are dead, you take out the liquid from this and go to another batch of cells, put the virus again and keep doing this. So it is not that a cell line becomes adopted and keep producing the virus. You just use cell line as a target for the virus that it will go infect, kill it, and more quantity of virus will be.
So you are looking at sequencing this virus. Yeah. Right? I mean, finding out the genetic sequence. Genetic sequence in a very simple way would be like, can we say alphabets in a storybook? Like, each of there'll be words and alphabets, right? You know?
Yeah. So that's for all the genetic basis of all living creatures are nucleic acid. In this case, it is RNA. There are viruses that have DNA, and all other organisms have DNA as a genetic material. But this viruses uses RNA as a genetic material, and that RNA is about 30,000 alphabets that it has. And in
so
that,
it's a book containing something like 30,000 alphabets. That's what one can say in simple way, right?
It's one chain, single-stranded RNA which has 30,000 letters.
Yeah.
And what happens to this virus is that as it is growing, infecting in people, growing from person to person, it keeps changing its sequences. And
Okay.
that is the biggest problem of these family of viruses have.
So something like, for example, if I take a photocopy of the book, maybe because of the smudge, the A might look like a O, or a O might look like something else. A D might D shape. That's what you are saying as changing, happening because of.
It is worse than that. It is like photocopying and A has become O. Precisely, A has become. It's not that it looks like that. It become different
It's
and
actually become a O, so it will express its function also as a O, right?
it has changed nature in that. It's like you are copying something and you made a mistake in the spelling. It's like that. So it's a real mistake, a real, which we call the mutation, and this is inheritable. So now that virus will have that sequence as its base and will keep multiplying in that way. And because this high mutation rate in this virus, it's very difficult to catch it in terms of vaccine or a drug. It's like a moving target. Today is different, tomorrow is different. Now you were targeting something that has already changed, so now you will not be able to use it against that virus.
Oh, okay. So that's why you need to find out some unchanging part in the sequence.
Exactly. So you are looking for, see, today we don't have a vaccine for AIDS. We have been working for 30 years for this reason, because there is nothing very stable, and whatever reasons you can, or like common flu, you don't have good vaccine which works for more than a year. Every year there has to be new vaccine, or drugs are not there for. So they are very difficult.
So these are like burglars who come with a different disguise every time.
Exactly. They will change their coat and come, so you don't recognize. Your immune system doesn't know that is the same guy, so they don't. They're not able to fight it. So when you sequence very large number, that gives you lots of information. So let's say if you have several hundred sequences available, collected from all over the India. So now we can trace back that from which origin this has come. Has it come from Italy? Has it come from England? Has it come from Iran? Or has it come from China? For example, so far the whatever sequence information is available, based on that one can say, so there are some 30 odd genome sequences that have been deposited in the public domain Indian isolates. Based on that, we can say that lots of our infection has come from Iran, and then some has come from Italy, and some has come from Wuhan in China. Those are three different entry points. And then by looking at them and isolating RNA and sequencing in from different individuals, we can say which one is spreading more, which one is spreading less, and which way it is spreading, whether it came to Hyderabad from Delhi or from Delhi via Nagpur, or because we'll be able to connect through the sequence. So this gives one piece of information which can be used for controlling the virus. So you know the path.
You said that until now, various institutions put together have sequenced about 30 isolates in India, right? If one looks at the world repository, something like about 5,000 entries one can see there. So, which essentially means that a big country like India should also contribute more, right?
Right. Yeah. So today, as we talk, there are more than 9,000 sequences that are deposited. From India, only 30, and mostly from the National Institute of Virology, which makes sense because they had the virus from the beginning itself. Now, CSIR laboratories, CCMB included, and IGIB in New Delhi, and soon IMTech from Chandigarh, we are going to sequence a large number. We are already doing. So we put together, we may be having now close to 30 odd sequences of our own, but we are polishing those. But in coming week or two, we should have at least 500 sequences done, and that will give us much better picture of what is happening, how the virus is changing, which part of the virus is less dynamic, so better target that for vaccine or for the drug. Something is and how is the biology of this virus? Can we predict whether it will be more severe, less severe? Lots of these things can come out from large number of isolates if they are sequenced.
Very interesting. I mean, I suppose for India, because it's going to be a slightly long haul, it's not like something that's going to end in 1 week. We need this information not only for today, but for some years to come. You are talking about various uses of this culture. One is, for example, you can do sequencing. I mean, from this, you can take the virus isolates from different patient groups in India, and then you can do sequencing. What other uses are there for this culture?
So one thing is that, of course, this is useful for sequencing, but for sequencing, there are other ways. So most of the sequencing we are doing not by culturing. Culturing we will do, and that is then easy. We can even take directly samples from patients.
Patients and then.
The way we do diagnostic using recognizing small parts of the genome by PCR amplifications, we can have a technique that we can amplify the entire genome and then sequence it. So these are called next generation sequencing technologies, NGS, which directly can sequence the virus in large numbers. So large number of sequencing will not be through cell culture, but it will directly sequencing the patient isolate. It requires a little bit of processing, but that's how it is done. For cell culture, we are interested in a few things. One is we can make large quantity of virus. So this large quantity of virus, very simple use can be that you inactivate this virus and try out as a vaccine. Because once if you have killed the virus, then virus is not able to infect anything. It's a dead thing.
So smallpox vaccine is something like this, right? Inactivated virus.
Right, even polio. So there are many such inactivated virus vaccines. So virus is dead, but its proteins, its surface molecules or other things are there. So if you inject in the blood, it's good opportunity for immune system to prepare itself. It will recognize, make antibodies. When the real virus comes through natural way of spreading, immune system is ready and it can fight it. So that is one.
Also, if you put an inactivated virus, I mean, for even people who have slight immune compromise, maybe people who are old, people who are having other kinds of diseases, even they would be able to be vaccinated by this kind of a thing, right?
Essentially, you can vaccinate. That is what is the thing that takes time. So that is the efficacy of the vaccine. How efficient it is. Can it work for the people with weaker immune system also? Generally, it should, because you are giving body time to get prepared itself. The immune system, even if it is slow, if it is given well in advance, a few weeks in advance, the body is ready for that. The other thing, you have to test it by this process. We are not doing anything damaging to the body. So safety of the thing. So that is why, although you can make such vaccine relatively fast, but the safety first and then the efficacy second, and then doing this in large number of people. And the later part, which is the efficacy part, you need to inject in the person, wait for some days, and then bring the live virus into the person. So that's not an easy thing to do. It requires a lot of regulation. That's why vaccine development takes a lot of time. Even if you have right candidate, you have to wait for several months for it to be sure and recognized to be released. So that's one thing we will be doing, but we will be doing it with the help of companies, because we are not in large scale production or something. So we are in a discussion with the companies.
But your cell culturing technology and the technique and the knowledge that you gain would help in developing this inactivated virus.
So we'll transfer that technology to a company, then they can scale it up and then make a huge quantity of virus. They should have the same kind of facility, VSL3 proper setup, so that they can make large quantity, inactivate and do the job.
Can we also use this cell culture for testing drugs? Suppose if we develop some antiviral drug for this COVID-19, can we use this for that?
Exactly. So the vaccine is the one part, but two other interesting things that one can do with this culture is, one is, which we are interested in, to understand the biology of this virus, how it behaves in the cell, what it does, what are the signaling involved. So if we understand more, we can know where to cut the line and the virus can be inactive. But the other thing which is that, let's say there are many antiviral drugs already available, something which is called repurposing. A drug which is known for something, if it works against this, but how do you know it works against this virus? So one easy way is, now we are going in the culture, we are adding the virus, and after 3 days cells are dying. Suppose you added your potential drug, now the cell will not die, because now the virus will be not able to survive, or it will not be able to infect the cells. So after a few days, you go and see whether virus counts are the same, or it has disappeared, or it has increased. So if it has same or it has disappeared, that means the cell is now able to survive without being affected by the virus, because you have added that drug to it. So this is a very quick, what we call an in vitro test, then such a drug, if this mammalian cell is able to survive, there's a good chance that this drug will be useful for the patient as well. So since these drugs, we prefer some drugs which are already known, so their toxicity, those things are known. So then this can directly be tried on a patient. So that opens up a very nice venue for looking for antiviral agents, which can be drug or which can be even for cleaning and or even PPE. You want something antiviral, you put in the culture, then it will stop growth of the virus. So that's very good use of this culture system once it is in place.
Nice, sir. So one of the other major activity that you are part of, I mean, your institute is part of, is digital surveillance for this COVID-19. So what is this digital surveillance? Can you sort of first explain to us what it is first?
Yeah. So the CSIR with many other agencies, many other institutions is coming up with a thing where we can do the testing, do sequencing, and feed this information in the mobile, through the cloud, and monitor which virus, which particle, which sequence is spreading where, what kind of symptoms the person is having, whether. So one of the complications of this virus, complication in the sense uniqueness of this virus, is that 30-40% of the people, when they are infected, they don't have symptoms. So they are called asymptomatic, but they are roaming around with virus and spreading into others unknowingly that they are infected. So if we have large number of testing and we can monitor with their mobile phones, with there is this now government has come with the thing, right? It's called
Arogya Setu.
Arogya Setu, very useful tool. I think everybody should have that. I'm having in my mobile. Yes. So when that is enabled with this kinds of molecular data, so we can do then follow up the virus and its spread and its effect. That will be very, very useful in controlling the disease in a very broad at national level, you can say. What we are also trying to connect is, but that is little bit long-term thing, it will take few months, is why some people are responding differently. Why is there a genetic nature in those people, then special genes or genomic features which allow them to fight this virus better, and this virus can grow, but it will not make you feel become sick. Or it is because the person in the past somehow had exposure to some similar virus and that's why the person is, or it's because of those, there are many variations that are possible. Or it is the virus sequence which is making, although it's able to grow, but it's not expressing many other bad features which we call a symptom. So those things we will be able to understand when we study the viral genome on the one side and the patient genome on the other side, and mix and match with this and try to figure out if there's a correlation among these things. So that's as a biology is a very exciting thing to explore, and which a knowledge of this kind will also be useful for us to tackle the problem better.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting part. I suppose as an institute which is working on frontal areas, frontiers of science, and then expanding knowledge. This would not only expand our knowledge, will also make us understand better what is the so-called innate immunity much better. Thank you for being with us in this show. It's been a very wonderful conversation. We learned a lot. We understood quite a lot. And we also now understand that how various scientific institutions in India is taking up that challenge and then doing its best. Thank you for being with us in the show. We'll keep watching Eureka. We'll come back with another conversation next time, same time. Thank you.
Thank you.